Imagine a baby who's not just smart, but actually trying to murder his own mom. Yeah, that's Stewie Griffin's okay.
I'm Stewie Griffin, and I'm gonna be kicking my dad's ass all day today.
Let's dive into the very first episode of Family Guy, where we meet the most terrifying baby in television history, Stewie Griffin. So, in the Griffin house, Peter's being, well, Peter. Meg's trying to be invisible. Chris is probably somewhere doing something weird. But up in the baby's room, that's where things get crazy. Because while everyone's going about their day, Stewie's turned his nursery into what basically looks like an evil scientist laboratory. Here's where it gets really interesting. Stewie's got this whole secret compartment system built into his room. Like, you pull on his teddy bear's ear, and suddenly this whole wall slides open to reveal an arsenal that would make James Bond nervous. We're talking ray guns, mind control devices, something that looks suspiciously like a time machine prototype. In one corner, there's this massive computer setup that would make NASA jealous. The screen's showing all these complicated calculations and what looks like satellite tracking data. And there's Stewie sitting in his high chair typing away with these tiny baby fingers like he's some kind of evil genius programmer. Now, you might be wondering, how does a baby get all this stuff? That's the genius part. Nobody questions when a baby orders things online because nobody expects a baby to be ordering things online. There's literally a scene where the mailman hands him a package marked plutonium and just goes about his day like it's totally normal. Throughout the episode, we see Stewie attempting multiple plots to take out Lois, and each one gets progressively more elaborate and honestly kind of genius in a terrifying way. Stewie, of course, is in full villain mode. He's decked out with every spy gadget and weapon you can imagine. This episode brings out all the action and a surprisingly epic showdown. The writers went all out on the battle between Lois and Stewie. It's got explosions, gadgets, even a sniper showdown. So after an epic struggle, Lois finally gets the upper hand and corners Stewie. But here's the kicker. Instead of going all the way, Lois can't bring herself to finish him off. She's his mother, after all, and it adds this unexpected twist of emotion in the middle of all the chaos. But just when you think it's over, bam, the twist. The whole thing was a simulation in Stewie's mind. It's a classic Family Guy move, leaving fans questioning what they just watched. This episode is truly one of the most memorable in the series. The action, the humor, the twists, it has everything that makes Family Guy the outrageous show it is. In this next wild episode, we're diving into Family Guy's very first episode, Death Has a Shadow, the one that introduced us to Peter Griffin. This episode is a roller coaster of welfare fraud, government hearings, and possibly the most reckless shopping spree in TV history. So, the story begins with Peter Griffin hard at work, by which I mean he's snoozing at his factory job. Peter's job commitment is as reliable as his sense of responsibility, which is to say, not at all. After a night out with the guys, Peter shows up drunk and promptly gets himself fired. I mean, come on, Peter. Who's shocked here? When he finally breaks the news to Lois, she's like, "What are we supposed to do now, Peter?" And Peter's like, "I don't know, maybe, ask the government for help?" Yep, this man's got a master plan. Welfare, here we come. But when Peter applies for welfare, he doesn't just get help. Oh no. He gets a massive check for $150,000 every single week. And what does Peter do? Well, he passes out from sheer joy and immediately jumps into spending mode. TVs, check. Moat around the house, check. A throne for himself, definitely check. Lois, of course, is not amused. She's walking around the house like, "Peter, why is there a throne in the living room?" And Peter's just sitting there like a king, smiling from ear to ear. I mean, he's convinced he's got this life thing figured out. Meanwhile, we get some classic side plots brewing. Meg's already becoming the family punching bag, and Brian, our favorite sarcastic dog, is just standing around in disbelief. I mean, even the dog can see that Peter's plan is about as solid as a house of cards. It's only episode 1, and Brian already knows he's surrounded by maniacs. But it doesn't take long for the government to catch on to Peter's little welfare mix-up. They haul him off to Washington, where he's suddenly in front of a Senate committee. This guy, in front of the Senate, trying to explain his life choices. And in classic Peter fashion, he gives a speech about how hard it is to be the breadwinner, with a whoops on the side. His speech is something like, "Look, being a dad is tough. I needed that $150K and, my bad, it's a disaster." But somehow, Peter just rolls with it. And just like that, Peter's out of trouble, and life is back to normal for the Griffins. Peter's back on the couch, Lois is sighing in resignation, and Brian's probably eyeing the nearest escape route. The episode ends with us knowing this family is going to be a hot mess, and we love them for it. This episode gave us a taste of the pure chaotic energy that is Family Guy. Now we're heading to the twisted town of Quahog for a breakdown of one of Family Guy's earliest chaotic episodes, Mind Over Murder. If you're a Family Guy fan, this one's going to be a fun ride, so let's dive in. We kick things off with Peter attending his son Chris's soccer game. Now, if you're Peter Griffin, watching your kid play sports is just code for cracking open a beer and getting in everyone else's business. It doesn't take long before Peter's doing what he does best, annoying the heck out of everyone around him. A small comment from another parent sparks Peter's wrath, and soon he's itching for a fight. And in a totally Peter move, he doesn't hit the guy he's aiming for. No, he ends up socking a pregnant woman instead. What? Just your average Saturday in Quahog. As you'd expect, punching a pregnant woman has consequences. So Peter's hit with a heavy sentence, house arrest. He's stuck in his own home, a fate worse than death for this guy. Now, being stuck indoors might not sound so bad, but for Peter, it's like caging a wild animal. Now, Peter's a man of action. When action means eating junk food, watching TV, or causing chaos in Quahog. Stuck in the house, he's bored out of his mind. At first, he tries to find ways to entertain himself. But soon enough, he hatches a brilliant idea. So, Peter decides to convert his basement into a bar. That's right, Quahog's newest watering hole is just a flight of stairs down, complete with Peter as the bartender. Soon, he's got his friends and neighbors flocking over, turning the Griffin home into the Drunken Clam 2.0. Peter's living his best life, playing bartender and entertaining his guests. For him, it's a dream come true. For Lois, though, it's a waking nightmare. Imagine coming home to find your husband has turned your basement into a dive bar. Eventually, Lois decides to join in on the basement bar shenanigans. She gets on stage to sing, and surprise, she's actually good. Like, really good. The crowd loves her, and this does not sit well with Peter, who's probably thinking, wait, am I not the star here? And just like that, Peter's jealousy starts bubbling over. He can't handle the fact that Lois might be more popular than him. He's like, I built this bar, I deserve the attention. It's safe to say Peter's ego has officially been bruised. So what does Peter do with this jealousy? He handles it poorly. In a classic Peter move, he throws a tantrum and destroys his own bar. Yup, he wrecks the very thing he built. This guy couldn't manage a lemonade stand without turning it into a disaster zone. All his friends leave and the bar is in ruins. Lois is, of course, not impressed, and Peter realizes, oops, maybe I went a little too far this time. But don't worry, it's Family Guy. There's always a lesson to learn, sort of. In the end, Peter apologizes to Lois. And though it's hard to tell with Peter, it's actually a heartfelt moment. So, with the basement bar gone and Peter grounded again, the Griffin family settles back into their version of normal, until Peter's next wild scheme, of course. So, there you have it. Mind Over Murder is one of those early Family Guy episodes that shows us exactly what Peter Griffin is all about. Now we're looking at Family Guy's unforgettable episode, Excellence in Broadcasting, where Brian, Quahog's liberal dog, meets conservative icon Rush Limbaugh. Things get intense, a little bizarre, and hilarious as Brian's politics take a wild U-turn. Let's jump in. So the episode kicks off with big news. Rush Limbaugh is in town for a book signing. Now, Brian hates Rush Limbaugh more than Stewie hates broccoli.
Man, I'm dead.
Just hearing Rush's name sends Brian into a rant so intense, even Lois starts thinking about setting a timer. Brian goes on about how terrible he thinks Rush is, but in an ironic twist, he decides to confront Rush face to face at the book signing. He drags Stewie along, probably hoping Stewie's usual sass will make it a little easier to confront his political nemesis. At the book signing, Brian's ready to tell Rush off, but things go a little differently than he planned. When he finally meets Rush, the conversation is unexpectedly civil. Rush actually listens to Brian and responds with a calm, thoughtful argument, enough to make Brian question his own opinions. And then, just like that, Brian is converted. I mean, he practically drinks the conservative Kool-Aid right there. Stewie, meanwhile, is as stunned as we are. I mean, liberal, Prius driving, Brian becoming conservative, this is like Family Guy stepping into the Twilight Zone.
Doggy!
Ow.
Doggy!
Ow.
With his new conservative beliefs, Brian goes all out. He doesn't just change his mind, he changes his entire look to match Rush Limbaugh's style, from head to toe. Yep, he's got the blazer, the red tie, the conservative haircut. He's basically mini Rush now. Brian starts preaching conservative values to his friends and family. He's lecturing Peter on personal responsibility, talking about free markets and quoting Rush in almost every sentence. Peter, Lois, and everyone else are just dumbfounded. But not everyone in the Griffin household is thrilled with the new Brian. Lois, who's always known Brian as her liberal buddy, is horrified. She can't believe what she's seeing, and eventually she confronts him. They go head to head in the kitchen, with Lois, was pointing out how bizarre this all is. She calls him out on his hypocrisy, especially considering his past liberal rants. But Brian is so deep in his new conservative mindset that he defends himself, saying he's finally woken up to reality. Meanwhile, Peter's just in the background, snacking on chips and watching the fireworks. Eventually, the doubts start to creep in. Brian's not so sure if he's really comfortable with this new conservative personality. He starts to feel like maybe he's lost a part of himself. It's a classic Brian crisis moment. He starts flipping through Rush's book one last time, realizing that maybe his conservative conversion wasn't quite as genuine as he thought. After all, Brian's liberal beliefs are part of who he is, and deep down, he can't deny that. At the end of the episode, Brian finds Rush again and tells him he's returning to his liberal roots. But it's not a bitter goodbye. Rush is totally cool with it. They shake hands and part ways on good terms. It's a rare moment of mutual respect, showing that maybe, just maybe, people with different beliefs can still be friends. And that's the rundown of excellence in broadcasting. This episode is a wild ride, from Brian's transformation into Mini Rush to his eventual return to normal. Now we're going over one of the darker and wilder Family Guy episodes, The Hand That Rocks the Wheelchair. This one has Stewie, his evil twin, and Meg trying to change her whole life. But of course, nothing goes as planned. The episode kicks off with Meg trying to escape her miserable life and find some confidence. This time, she's developed a crush on Joe Swanson, the Griffin's police officer neighbor in a wheelchair. Yep, Meg's decided she wants to be with Joe. Peter, as usual, is completely clueless, and Joe's completely oblivious to Meg's feelings, but that doesn't stop her. Meg dives headfirst into trying to win him over, and to say it gets uncomfortable would be an understatement. Meanwhile, Stewie is in the middle of a new experiment. He's trying to create a new weapon, but he accidentally spills a sample of his own DNA, leading to the creation of, evil Stewie. Yep, Stewie's evil clone comes to life, and this guy has zero filter. He's basically every worst part of Stewie, just dialed up to 100. Evil Stewie quickly becomes a terrifying force, and it doesn't take long for him to start causing mayhem. Evil Stewie doesn't waste any time. He starts causing chaos around the Griffin household. The two Stewies go head-to-head in a battle of wits, but Evil Stewie is relentless. He even targets Brian, going after him in some genuinely scary ways. This isn't just a regular Family Guy prank.
Whoa, calm down, Jamal.
Evil Stewie is on a mission to cause real harm, and he goes after everyone Stewie cares about, especially Brian. The two Stewies clash repeatedly, with Stewie trying to stop his clone from destroying his family. Meanwhile, Meg is taking her crush on Joe to uncomfortable levels. She tries everything to get his attention, even going as far as sneaking into his house while he's asleep. Meg's completely ignoring boundaries at this point, and it just keeps getting worse. Joe wakes up and is completely freaked out to find Meg there. She tries to express her feelings, but Joe is horrified and tells her it's inappropriate. Poor Meg's plan completely backfires, and she's left feeling more humiliated than ever. Back at the Griffins, Stewie finally decides it's time to put an end to evil Stewie's reign of terror. The two engage in an epic showdown, with Stewie desperately trying to outsmart his own evil clone. It's intense, with lots of back and forth, as evil Stewie refuses to go down without a fight. Finally, Stewie manages to defeat evil Stewie, taking him down and restoring some level of peace to the Griffin house. But it's clear Stewie is left a little shaken by the whole experience. And then there's poor Meg. After her humiliating experience with Joe, she realizes that maybe she needs to focus on herself instead of trying to win someone's affection. It's a bittersweet ending for Meg, who's left more lonely than ever, but at least slightly wiser. And that's the rundown of The Hand That Rocks the Wheelchair, one of Family Guy's darker and more chaotic episodes. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit notification bell to stay up to date on all the latest hijinks from the Griffin family.